The Riverstone Correctional Facility wasn't just any prison. It was a fortress of forgotten souls. Tucked away in the backwoods of Georgia, the high-security compound loomed like a tombstone against the skyline. Thick concrete walls, rusted fences laced with barbed wire, and towers manned by guards armed to the teeth. This was a place where hope came to die. But deep inside those bleak walls, something unthinkable was about to happen. Her name was Aaliyah Monroe, 30 years old, former real estate broker turned infamous scam artist. The press called her the Black Widow of Atlanta after her second husband was found dead in a bathtub just months after she inherited everything he owned. There wasn't enough evidence to convict her for that death, but everyone knew she was dangerous. And now she was serving a 25-year sentence for a string of high-end financial crimes: fraud, identity theft, and racketeering. Aaliyah didn't act like most inmates. While others kept their heads down, she kept her chin high. She walked the yard like she owned it, even in that bright orange jumpsuit. Cold, calculating, beautiful. She was the kind of woman who could make even the most seasoned guard forget the rules. That's exactly what happened to Officer Michael Harris. Michael was new to Riverstone. 35 years old, clean-cut, straight-laced. He had served 8 years in the military, lost his wife to cancer, and moved back to Georgia to take care of his aging mother. Becoming a corrections officer wasn't his dream, but it paid the bills. And he believed in second chances. What he didn't believe was how fast Aaliyah got under his skin. It started small. A passing smile during the library shift. A polite thank you when he escorted her to medical. Then came the notes. Folded pieces of paper, slipped between bookshelves, hidden in books, passed like teenage love letters in a high school hallway. Against every regulation, every ounce of his training, Michael began to write back. He told himself it was harmless. She was just lonely. So was he. But in a place like Riverstone, nothing stays secret for long. Other inmates began to notice. Aaliyah started getting special privileges, longer showers, fresh fruit, extra library time. The whispers started. And yet, Michael didn't stop. In fact, he fell harder. He told himself she was different, that she saw the real him, that somehow against all odds this was love. By the time his supervisor warned him to keep his distance, it was already too late. Because Michael had already made a decision that would change his life forever. He was going to marry her. And within weeks, the state would approve a wedding inside the prison walls. No one could have imagined what would follow. The request to marry an inmate raised eyebrows all the way up to the warden's office. Even in a system where prisoner marriages weren't technically illegal, it was rare, especially when the bride was a convicted con artist and the groom wore a badge. But Michael Harris didn't care about rules anymore. He believed in love, in redemption, in fresh starts. And somehow, Aaliyah Monroe had convinced him that they could have that, even inside a prison. He filed the paperwork with trembling hands, knowing the fallout could cost him his job. When a warden called him in, Michael braced for suspension. Instead, Warden Keith Dunham leaned back in his chair and said, "If she breaks your heart, don't come crying to me." Michael left the warden's office with the approved paperwork clutched in his hands. But instead of relief, he felt an ache settle deep in his chest. He sat in his truck for over an hour, the engine off, windshield fogging with his breath, staring blankly at the fence line. He had made up his mind. But the past, the part he never talked about, was tugging at him like a ghost he couldn't shake. Michael grew up in a broken household just outside Macon, Georgia. His father, a war veteran, came back from the Gulf with a head full of trauma and a bottle always within reach. Most nights, the man didn't even remember his own son's name, just swung fists and shouted at shadows. It was Michael's mother, Dolores, who held the family together. Barely. She worked nights at a textile mill, cleaned houses on weekends, and still managed to make dinner, do laundry, and press her son's Sunday shirt. She used to say, "When you grow up, baby, be better than what raised you. Love different. Love real." And he tried. God knows he tried. He joined the Army at 18, looking for structure a way out. He served honorably, did 2 tours overseas, came back with clean boots and a chest full of medals, but not much else. Then he met Sarah, a schoolteacher with freckles and a laugh that made everything quiet. They were married just 2 years before the diagnosis came. Stage 4 breast cancer. Michael never left her side. He slept in that cold hospital chair for 17 months, feeding her Jell-O, reading books aloud, brushing her hair when she couldn't lift her arms. When she died, he held her hand until her skin went cold. He never really recovered. He moved back home to take care of Dolores, now fading with early-onset dementia. He took the job at Riverstone not because he wanted it, but because it was close and steady and lonely in the kind of way that didn't ask for much. He stopped dreaming, stopped feeling, stopped believing that he'd ever love again, until Aaliyah Monroe smiled at him in the prison library. She didn't smile like the others. Hers was slow, calculated, just a twitch at the corner of her lips. But it hit him like a wave. She made eye contact like she saw something in him, something worth saving. And for the first time in years, Michael felt like a man again. He tried to brush it off, told himself it was inappropriate, dangerous. But Aaliyah kept writing him notes, little folded pieces of paper hidden in books or slipped in his coat pocket. They didn't talk about prison or rules. They talked about dreams, regrets, music, faith, love. And every note carved a tiny crack in the wall Michael had built around his heart. She wasn't just another inmate. She was different, smart, charming, mysterious. And maybe, just maybe, she could fill that quiet space Sarah left behind. Now, with a wedding on the horizon and a warden who didn't even try to stop him, Michael was all in. No turning back. That night, he stood in front of a dusty photo of Sarah on the mantel, her soft brown eyes frozen in time. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but I can't be alone forever." He turned off the light, and in the dark, he let himself believe that maybe Aaliyah was the second chance he'd been waiting for. The approval came with strict limitations. No physical contact outside of the wedding ceremony, no conjugal visits, no special privileges granted to either party after the marriage. But Aaliyah didn't care. She smiled like a woman who had already won. She said yes. Michael told his mother that night, his voice thick with emotion. "We're getting married in 2 weeks." His mother didn't say much, just sighed and turned off the TV. The wedding planning began, if you could even call it that. There would be no dress, no flowers, no music. Just a plain service in the prison chapel with an ordained minister and 2 guards as witnesses. Aaliyah would wear her orange jumpsuit. Michael would be in uniform. The image should have stopped any man in his right mind. But Michael wasn't thinking clearly anymore. He was in love with a woman the world had written off as a manipulator, a liar, and maybe even a killer. Behind the walls, the inmates whispered. "She got another one," they said. "She's setting him up, just like the others." Even some guards began to distance themselves from Michael. They called him Romeo behind his back. One veteran officer pulled him aside and said, "I hope you know what you're doing, Harris. That woman's not wired like the rest of us." But Michael wasn't listening. Or maybe he didn't want to hear it. Aaliyah's letters had become his lifeline. She wrote him poetry. She talked about building a future. She told him he was the only man who had ever seen the real her. And he believed her, every word. A few days before the ceremony, Michael made a quiet trip to the bank. He updated his will, added Aaliyah as the sole beneficiary to his $600,000 life insurance policy. It was a gesture of commitment, he told himself. A promise. Proof that he trusted her completely. Back at the prison, Aaliyah was glowing. She was polite, cooperative, soft-spoken. Even the medical staff noted how much she'd changed since the romance began. "It's like she's found her purpose," one nurse wrote in her file. But no one asked why her eyes sometimes flicked toward the hallway camera when she thought no one was looking, or why she seemed to linger near the laundry room door, where surveillance had recently gone offline. She was watching. She was planning. And the day of the wedding was coming fast. The day of the wedding arrived quietly, without fanfare. The sky over Riverstone was overcast, a blanket of gray pressing down on the concrete compound. But inside the prison chapel, normally used for grief counseling and AA meetings, something surreal was taking shape. They tried to make it look like a celebration. Someone placed a plastic bouquet on the altar. A prison chaplain wore a frayed stole over his collar. Two folding chairs faced each other beneath a dim ceiling light that buzzed like it was irritated by the occasion. Michael Harris stood near the front in full uniform, polished boots, shirt neatly pressed, but with a nervous sweat trickling down his spine. He wasn't the only one sweating. Two correctional officers stood at the back of the room, arms folded, radio earpieces in place, watching like hawks. Then the door opened, and in she walked. Aaliyah Monroe, in her standard issue orange jumpsuit, shackled at the ankles, wrists bound until the very last minute. And still, she moved like she was floating. Her hair was braided back neatly, her lips glossed just enough to shine. There was no veil, no bouquet, just a woman walking toward her third husband in a room full of strangers who doubted her sincerity. The shackles were removed. For the first time in months, she stood freely, just a few feet away from Michael. And when their eyes met, she smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that could have melted steel. "Ready," he whispered. "I've never been more sure of anything," she replied. The ceremony was short. The chaplain read the standard vows, his voice flat and practiced. Aaliyah repeated them softly, her voice steady and calm. Michael's hands trembled as he slid a simple gold band onto her finger, one he'd bought with the last of his savings. She lifted her hand to admire it, then looked up and whispered, "Perfect fit." When the chaplain said, "You may now kiss the bride," there was hesitation, just for a beat. Kissing an inmate was against protocol, even during a wedding. But Warden Dunham had approved this exception. And so, in front of God, the guards, and the cold eyes of a few curious inmates looking through the chapel window, Michael leaned forward and kissed his new wife. Applause echoed, half-hearted, awkward, obligatory. The newlyweds shared a few private minutes in a side room. Nothing intimate, just conversation. Aaliyah told him how grateful she was, how she never believed she could be loved like this, how he had saved her soul. And then it was over. Aaliyah was escorted back to her unit. The shackles returned. The door slammed shut behind her. Michael watched through the glass, something tightening in his chest as she disappeared down the corridor. That night, he sat alone at home, wedding certificate still in hand, staring at the empty side of his bed. In a nearby cell, Aaliyah lay back on her cot and smiled to herself, because the wedding had gone exactly as she planned, and the clock was now ticking. That night, alone in her cell, Aaliyah lay flat on the thin mattress, staring at the cracks in the ceiling. She didn't sleep. She rarely did. Not really. She thought about the wedding, the way Michael had looked at her like she was something holy, like she hadn't spent half her life lying for survival. He was sweet, simple, the kind of man who still believed women like her could be saved. But Aaliyah had stopped believing in salvation a long time ago. What she didn't say, what she'd never say out loud, was that she once loved someone like Michael, long before the headlines, long before the prison jumpsuit and shackles. She was 17, working nights at a diner outside Savannah, when she met her first love. His name was Quincy. He was older, slick, dangerous in a way that made her feel invincible. By 19, she was helping him run credit scams and fake identities. By 21, she was pregnant and alone. Quincy shot dead in a motel parking lot during a deal gone sideways. The baby didn't survive the stress. The hospital listed it as a miscarriage. Aaliyah never corrected them. She learned two things that year. 1, love made you weak. 2, weakness got you killed. So, she became what the world already assumed she was, a con, a hustler, a woman who used men before they could use her. The Black Widow moniker didn't hurt. If people feared her, they wouldn't touch her. And if they didn't touch her, they couldn't break her. But Michael? Michael had touched something she'd buried so deep she almost forgot it existed. And that scared her more than anything. She reached under her cot, fingers brushing against the worn edge of her notebook, the one with floor plans, names, and a $600,000 circle in red ink. Her eyes stung for a moment, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she whispered out loud, "I'm sorry, baby." Then she rolled over, pulled the scratchy wool blanket over her shoulder, and stared at the door until morning came. By dawn, the softness was gone. The plan was back in motion. The days following the wedding felt like a strange dream. Michael returned to work, trying to act like nothing had changed. But everything had. He was now a married man. And not just to anyone, but to a woman the state had labeled a manipulative felon. Aaliyah Monroe was his wife, legally and irrevocably. And though the title made him feel proud, it also weighed on him like a badge he couldn't take off. His coworkers didn't say much. Some shook their heads behind his back. Others avoided eye contact altogether. But one senior officer, Sergeant Bill Granger, finally pulled him aside in the staff locker room. "You got a death wish, Harris?" the man asked bluntly. Michael smirked. "It's love, Bill. I didn't ask you to understand it." "No, but I'll be the one writing the damn report when it all blows up." Michael laughed it off, but something in his gut twisted. Still, he pushed it down. He had made his choice. And love, real love, was always worth the risk. That weekend, he went to the bank again. He updated his life insurance policy, officially naming Aaliyah Monroe Harris as the sole beneficiary. $600,000. Tax-free. No questions asked. It had once been meant for his mother, but she had grown distant since the wedding, refused to answer his calls, didn't show up for the ceremony, and left voicemails that ended in silence. "I want to take care of her," Michael told the banker. "In case anything ever happens to me." The banker blinked. "You're sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Meanwhile, back in the prison, Aaliyah was already planting new seeds. She started spending more time in the laundry room, an area she wasn't usually assigned to. No one questioned it. She smiled, played sweet, said she just wanted to help out. But it wasn't long before one of the guards, Officer Pierce, caught her talking to someone she wasn't supposed to. Deshaun Green, a tall, heavily tattooed inmate with a reputation for hacking and surveillance. Deshaun was in for cybercrime and identity theft. Quiet type, always watching. And once upon a time, long before prison walls and orange jumpsuits, he and Aaliyah had been more than just business partners. When Officer Pierce walked by, Aaliyah stopped talking and gave Deshaun a cold stare, as if he were nothing more than another inmate. But the cameras said otherwise. They'd already been spotted speaking through the laundry chute. Twice. The thing most people didn't know, and wouldn't have believed even if they did, was that Aaliyah Monroe and Deshaun Green had history. Not just shared time in holding cells or overlapping rap sheets. Real history. Intimate. Messy. Dangerous. Back in Atlanta, before the name Black Widow ever hit a headline, Aaliyah and Deshaun were partners. Not in the romantic sense at first, but in the kind of way two broken people find each other in dark corners of a crooked world. He ran digital scams, phishing, surveillance hacks, money laundering through shell accounts. She handled the face-to-face operations, sweet-talking bankers, wooing marks, forging paperwork with a steady hand and a killer smile. They made money, good money, and somewhere between fake passports and burner phones, they crossed the line. One night turned into 3 months. Then came a job that went south, bad intel, a wrong address, and a DEA raid that left Aaliyah in cuffs and Deshaun slipping out the back door. She never forgot that. And when she saw him again in Riverstone, older but still sharp, still watching, she didn't smile. She studied him. Deshaun, for his part, thought she'd try to kill him. Instead, she passed him a bar of soap in the laundry chute, with a tiny note tucked inside the wrapper. "Want to make it right. No signature. No threats. Just 6 words that brought the past crashing back like a wave." At first, he ignored it. For 2 weeks, nothing. Then one night, she caught him alone by the dryer machines. He looked at her, and for a second, the old fire flickered in his eyes. "You left me to rot," she whispered. "You ran the wrong play," he shot back. And that was it. That was the entire fight. 2 sentences between 2 criminals who understood that the world didn't owe them anything, and neither did each other. But Aaliyah knew how to get what she wanted. Over the next few days, she softened her approach. She complimented his hacks, left coded messages tucked behind bleach bottles, asked about his mother, his childhood, the kind of questions that made you feel seen. And slowly, Deshaun started watching her like he used to. Trust crept in, not the kind built on love, but the kind built on old rhythms and unfinished business. When the time came to talk about the real plan, Aaliyah didn't plead. She didn't promise him anything either. She just looked him in the eyes and said, "You owe me, and this time, you finish what you start." And Deshaun, like so many others before him, nodded, because Aaliyah Monroe didn't need to raise her voice to command an army. No one reported it, because, again, Aaliyah knew how to manipulate the flow of attention. She befriended the right female guards, made herself look like the reformed victim who just wanted to live a clean, quiet life with her husband. Even the prison chaplain, who'd officiated her wedding, spoke on her behalf during weekly reports. "She's turning over a new leaf," he wrote. "Marriage may have saved her." But what no one saw was the notebook hidden beneath her mattress. Inside it, written in tiny, careful script, were notes, floor plans, and names. One of them circled in red. Michael Harris. Another underlined twice. $600,000 payout. She'd done this before, but this time she was inside the system. And now she had a husband in uniform. It happened just 2 days after Michael signed the paperwork. A Sunday evening. Quiet. Too quiet. Michael had taken a night shift voluntarily, something he rarely did. Said he wanted to be close to Aaliyah, to check on her, maybe just steal a glance while doing rounds. His supervisor let it slide. He was married now, after all. What harm could it do? By 11:43 p.m., he was logged into the surveillance hub alone. That room, buried deep in the administration wing, had only one entrance. Thick steel door. One-way access. Key card protected. At 12:09 a.m., all the security cameras covering Units D and E suddenly went dark, flickered, glitched, and then blacked out. By 12:26 a.m., the power returned. But Michael didn't respond to his radio. Not once. Not even a static crackle. At 12:48 a.m., Officer Granger found him. The door to the surveillance room was left ajar, a violation of every rule. Inside, Michael lay slumped in his chair, eyes wide open, lips slightly parted, a faint purple bruise circling his neck. On the floor beside him, his wedding band. No sign of a struggle. No forced entry. Just him and silence. In those final seconds, Michael didn't scream. He didn't fight back. Not the way the reports expected. He just froze. At first, he thought it was a prank. Someone behind him, Deshaun, maybe playing some sick joke. The cord looped fast, tight, yanking him backward with such force his chair skidded across the linoleum. His hands clawed at the pressure around his neck, fingers slipping on smooth fabric. He couldn't breathe. The world dimmed at the edges. Sounds blurred, but through the fog, a single image flashed in his mind. Not Aaliyah, not even his mother. Sarah, his first wife. Her hospital bed, the way her lips curved in that final, tired smile. And then came something colder. Another face. Another woman. Aaliyah. He saw her in his mind, wearing that faint smirk from the wedding, head tilted, eyes unreadable. In that instant, Michael knew. She'd never loved him. His body slackened, not from lack of oxygen, but from heartbreak, from the weight of betrayal. His wedding ring slipped off his hand and clinked against the floor as he slumped sideways. The room swayed like a ship in a storm, monitors blinking, screens still lit with camera feeds he couldn't see anymore. He had come into Riverstone believing in second chances, believing he could save someone. But in the end, he was just a man in love with a lie. His final thought, just before the dark took him completely, was a whisper meant for no one. I was a fool. And then, silence. The initial assumption? Heart attack. Maybe stress. Maybe suicide. But one glance at the bruising on his neck, and that theory fell apart. A post-mortem report confirmed the truth. Ligature strangulation. Michael Harris had been murdered. The prison went into lockdown. Sirens screamed through the halls. Every cell was checked. Every inmate counted. Every guard interrogated. And yet, Aaliyah Monroe sat in her bunk, calm as still water. When the warden entered her cell that morning, she didn't ask what was going on. She simply whispered, "Is he dead?" That single question made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The investigation began immediately. But Riverstone wasn't built for this kind of scandal. The guards were shaken. The administration panicked. And the state, already under pressure for prison abuse cases, sent in 2 detectives from Atlanta within 24 hours. They seized every computer, every piece of evidence, every handwritten report. And then came the most damning discovery of all. Michael's bank records. Just days before the wedding, he had named Aaliyah Monroe Harris as the sole beneficiary of his life insurance policy. $600,000. No contingency. No delay. And what's more, his death fell within the payout clause. Natural or unnatural. Accidental or criminal. It didn't matter. She was entitled to the money, unless they could prove she planned the murder. Detectives Carla Jennings and Marcus Reed weren't new to death inside prison walls. They'd seen their share of stabbings, suicides staged as overdoses, even a guard who was poisoned with instant coffee laced with bleach. But this case felt different. This wasn't a fight gone wrong or a petty grudge exploding into violence. This was quiet, clean, calculated. And the prime suspect? The victim's own wife, Aaliyah Monroe, convicted scam artist, twice widowed, now linked to the suspicious death of a third husband. This one a prison guard who had been foolish enough to love her. When Carla and Marcus entered her interrogation room on day 3 of the investigation, Aaliyah looked rested. Her orange jumpsuit was neatly pressed. She had braided her hair overnight. She sat with her back straight, her eyes locked onto them with a serenity that felt unnatural. "We're sorry for your loss," Carla began. Aaliyah tilted her head. "Are you?" No tears, no outrage, no breakdown, just cold, quiet defiance. They asked about her relationship with Michael. She smiled. "He was kind, gentle. He treated me like a person, like a woman. Do you know how rare that is in a place like this?" When asked where she was the night of the murder, she replied, "Sleeping, with 30 other inmates, locked in from the outside. So unless I walk through walls now, I think you have your answer." On paper, she had a point. Her cell was locked. Cameras showed no sign of her moving. She had no key card, no fingerprints in the surveillance room, no direct evidence. But then came Deshaun Green. The detectives pulled visitor logs, work assignments, laundry schedules, and there it was. Deshaun had been on duty in the laundry room the night of Michael's murder, a space directly beneath the surveillance room, with access to maintenance crawl spaces. And more damning, Deshaun had a background in electronics. Before prison, he had run a dark web repair ring for stolen surveillance systems. They pulled his cell apart. Hidden inside a torn mattress was a makeshift SIM card reader, an old USB stick, and a crumpled notebook filled with half-legible codes. But the real smoking gun came from a backup server that Michael himself had installed weeks earlier, paranoid that someone was messing with the cameras. The audio feed was grainy, mostly static, but at 12:04 a.m., 5 minutes before the cameras went black, a voice could be heard whispering through a vent. "You ready?" Another voice, lower, gruffer, replied, "You sure you want this?" Then silence. Then the sound of metal against metal, a dragging noise, and something soft like fabric tightening around a neck. The detectives played it on loop, over and over. They brought Deshaun in next. At first, he denied everything, said he hadn't seen Aaliyah in weeks, said Michael was just another guard man. But after 16 hours in the box, he broke. She said it would look like a heart attack. She said nobody would care, just another dead white boy who thought he could save her. When asked directly, "Did you kill Michael Harris?" he hesitated, then nodded. "She planned everything. I just followed orders." The courtroom was packed. Local reporters lined the back wall. Every news station from Savannah to Atlanta sent a crew. Some were there for the scandal, a prison wedding turned homicide. Others were there for the spectacle, a woman accused of manipulating her way into a 6-figure payout, using love as a murder weapon. They called her the prison widow on TV. Online, she had become something else entirely. Hashtag Black Widow Returns was trending by the 3rd day of the trial. Aaliyah Monroe walked into court wearing a fitted beige jumpsuit, escorted by 2 female deputies. Her hair was braided tightly. Her face was expressionless. But as she passed the jury box, she made eye contact with nearly every juror, just long enough to let them feel it. The state of Georgia charged her with first-degree murder conspiracy to commit murder, and fraud. The key witness? Deshaun Green, now a cooperating informant, testifying in exchange for a life sentence without parole. The prosecution laid it all out. Aaliyah had coaxed Michael Harris into marriage. She had manipulated him into naming her sole beneficiary of his life insurance. Just 48 hours after the policy change, Michael was found strangled in a locked surveillance room. Deshaun Green's confession, combined with the audio recording, sealed the narrative. Aaliyah Monroe is a mastermind, the district attorney said during opening statements. She didn't pull the cord herself. She didn't have to. She spent her entire life making men do it for her. But Aaliyah wasn't done playing. Her defense team, court-appointed but sharp, leaned hard into reasonable doubt. They argued Deshaun had acted alone, fueled by jealousy over her marriage to Michael. They pointed out the lack of physical evidence. No fingerprints, no DNA, no security footage of Aaliyah outside her cell. And they reminded the jury that Deshaun was a career liar, willing to say anything to avoid death row. And then came the most shocking moment of the trial. Aaliyah took the stand. She looked straight at the jury and said, "I love my husband." She described Michael as kind, broken, and beautiful. She painted herself as a reformed woman who had finally found peace. Her voice cracked in all the right places. She even pulled out a tear when talking about their first kiss inside the chapel. "I would never hurt Michael," she whispered. "I've been blamed for things before. I'm used to it. But this is evil. And it's not me." And for a brief moment, the courtroom believed her. Even some jurors looked uncomfortable. The media coverage softened. A morning show anchor asked, "Is it possible she's the scapegoat in a system eager to blame the woman?" But then came the prosecution's final strike. They played the unedited version of the surveillance room recording. In the background, faint but clear, was the sound of a woman laughing, soft, smooth, unmistakably Aaliyah, just seconds after Michael's final breath. The courtroom went silent. She never looked away from the screen. The jury deliberated for less than 5 hours. Some had walked into that courtroom believing Aaliyah Monroe was a grieving wife. A few even admitted to being moved by her testimony. But after hearing that soft laugh, chilling, calculated, completely devoid of remorse, they knew what she really was. On the 6th day of trial, the foreman rose, cleared his throat, and read aloud, "We, the jury, find the defendant, Aaliyah Monroe, guilty of murder in the first degree, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty of financial fraud." She didn't flinch. She just blinked. Once. Judge Caldwell leaned forward and, in a measured voice, sentenced her to death by lethal injection. There were gasps in the gallery. The reporters scribbled faster. Michael's mother, who had sat stone-faced through the entire trial, let out a single sigh and closed her eyes. She'd lost her son to love, and now watched justice take its final form. As deputies shackled Aaliyah and prepared to lead her out, she turned to the judge and said, "You may bury me, but I'll still live longer than every man who ever underestimated me." It was the last thing she ever said in public. 6 months later, the $600,000 life insurance payout was frozen indefinitely. The state seized it under the Slayer statute, preventing anyone who commits murder from profiting from the victim's death. Deshaun Green began his life sentence in a supermax facility where he was labeled a high-risk informant. Rumor has it he was attacked in the showers 6 weeks into his sentence, but survived barely. Aaliyah sat on death row in isolation at Pulaski State Prison. Her cell was small, sterile. She was given no mirrors, no visitors, only paper, pens, and one Bible. She never wrote another love letter again. But one morning, a prison chaplain found a folded note beneath her cot. The night before her execution, Aaliyah Monroe didn't cry. She didn't pray. She didn't ask for a priest. She simply sat upright on the edge of her cot, hands folded neatly in her lap, staring at the concrete wall like it was a window into somewhere only she could see. Outside her door, the guard rotation doubled. Cameras rolled on a loop. Warden Blake himself had walked the tier that afternoon, saying nothing, just making sure everything was by the book. No mistakes. No delays. The world was watching now. At exactly 10:03 p.m., the chaplain stopped by her cell. He asked the usual questions. Did she want to speak with family? Would she like a Bible reading? A final confession? Aaliyah looked up, calm as ever. Tell me something, preacher, she said. If a soul is black as night, but once, just once, it loved something pure, does that count for anything? The chaplain hesitated. Only God knows what counts. She smiled faintly. That's what I thought. She turned away, facing the back wall again. Thank you for coming. That was it. No further words. No requests. Not even a last meal. By midnight, the lights dimmed to night mode. Aaliyah lay down, her braids fanned neatly across the pillow, eyes wide open. Sleep didn't come, but neither did regret. Only memory. She pictured the chapel, the kiss, the ring, the look in Michael's eyes before everything turned. And just before dawn, she sat up one last time, pulled a scrap of paper from beneath her mattress, wrote down 10 words in small, perfect cursive, folded it once, slid it under the cot, then lay back down, eyes closed, breathing even, expression unreadable. It read, I told him I'd love him forever. I just never said how long forever would last. 2 years later, Riverstone Chapel. The prison has since banned all inmate weddings. The folding chairs are gone, the altar removed, the fake flowers burned. But in a dusty corner of the old surveillance room, a faded photo still sits, curled at the edges, warped from heat and time. It shows a man in uniform and a woman in shackles, holding hands, smiling faintly beneath flickering fluorescent light. Someone taped a note beneath it. Even in hell, love leaves a mark. If this story left you speechless, hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for gripping true crime stories every single day. Because sometimes the most dangerous love stories are the ones written behind bars.